This is big. Let me just say, like, the fact that Joy Reid on MSNBC is letting her audience know that there are evangelicals, not just Christians, not mainline, but evangelical Christians who reject the right-wing, predominantly white evangelical narrative is really big. April, I have permission to record
I was
this
finally
now.
Prepared for that start.
Okay. Happy freaking Friday, everyone. Hello. Wow. A lot to get to, again, in this episode.
Yeah. It was like a slower week as far as there wasn't any like one main news story, but there's a lot of news stories still.
And we're going to get into all of it. I'm Tim Whitaker.
And I'm April Ajoy.
Welcome to TNE Recaps. Roll the stinger. Not bad for winging it.
The best intro we've ever done.
Not too shabby. April, it's great to see you. Hello, friends. Welcome to the TNE Weekly Friday Recap. A lot to get into. April, how's your week been? How has it been over there in good old Kentucky?
It has been emotional because my youngest started kindergarten this week.
Oh, no.
And honestly, the person who cried the most was Beecher.
I love that so much.
I've kind of been crying, like tearing up on and off, and been sad about it for really the last year because I knew it was coming. Like there's little moments. It was like, oh, this time next year she'll be gone. And then I would talk to Beecher about it, and Beecher kind of, they didn't necessarily make fun of me, but they were kind of like, why are you sad about that? Like it's
right.
And then they bawled, and I was like, you were getting upset with me, and here you are, like, just can't even function. You're crying so hard. And I couldn't even really cry about the moment because I had to console my spouse.
I love Beecher even more than I did when I first met them. And first off, because we all met a couple, it will be 2 years ago in December. That's crazy. We did a live in-person podcast event in Chattanooga with Mike from Mad Priest Coffee, and I invited you to be one of the co-hosts, and Beecher came out. We had a great time. And now every time you say Beecher, I love hearing the name because I just think that they're so wonderful. So
they are pretty wonderful. How's your week going, Tim?
Busy because, and I can't tell people yet. They're going to find out next week when we do our weekly recap, but I am going somewhere for a week next week, and I have no idea how I even got to be in this position, but I'm going. And so I have to pack, and I have to get new gear, and I have to get a sports jacket. The person who I'm going with was like, hey, the people I'm talking to said you might want to bring some fancy clothes. I'm like, bro,
fancy clothes.
Look at me. I do not wear suits. I don't wear sports jackets. I don't even own like an actual dress shirt. I don't own a tie. So now I have to go out and I have to go shopping for some of these things.
Wow.
In case we're part of some kind of, after party thing where the dress code is more than just a t-shirt and shorts.
That's amazing. I am excited to see what that looks like because I've never seen you dressed up.
Me either. It's been a long time. Well, I mean, April, you work from home. I work in this guest bedroom studio all day, so my dress attire is atrocious. I mean, right now I'm wearing this shirt, which, by the way, I'll put a link into the show notes. It says the patriarchy is poison. It's badass.
Ooh.
Someone in our community made it. But I'm wearing basketball shorts. I'm wearing like old gray basketball shorts, and that's what I wear 24/7. In fact, I'm convinced that because I go to, of course, 7-Eleven to get my blueberry coffee.
Shameless plug.
So fresh. I walk to that 7-Eleven pretty much every morning, and I look like a completely disheveled, right? My hair is never combed. I'm tired. I'm just kind of waking up usually. I'm wearing whatever. I don't match. I'm wearing sandals. I don't know what those people think I do for a living because I'm never put together. I'm never going to work. Who knows? But yeah, so that's kind of my vibe 24/7, to be frank with you.
Honestly, be comfortable. Life is too short to be in uncomfortable clothes.
I completely agree. So anyway, so I have to go buy this stuff at some point before I leave. I leave Sunday night, and I get home Friday, I believe. I get home Friday. I did buy some new gear because I'm going to be like vlogging a lot of it for content for YouTube and for podcasts. So I got like some new microphones and some pretty cool stuff. So that's exciting. But this will be, I've been to a lot of events. This will be the biggest event I've ever been to in the world that we occupy. And I am completely humbled that I even got invited. I'll just say that. And I'm very interested to see what it's going to be like. It'll be a very new experience for me.
Yeah, it's going to be night and day from all those Turning Point events that you went to.
Yeah, it might be, or it might not be. I really have no idea.
Maybe it'll be the same.
I have no idea. So, I mean, yeah, I wonder if people are going to drop the comments where I'm going if they put two and two together. But I don't want to announce it officially until I actually go and actually do the content. I mean, our next episode, I'll be in a hotel room, so I can talk about it more freely then. I just don't know what to expect, So, anyway, yeah. So that's been my week, kind of prepping for that. And just the usual, making content. I did do a Wednesday podcast only episode thinking about the current like rise of the evangelicals and Christians for Harris kind of movement and what we do with that. So we'll dive into that later on as well. But yeah, it's been quite a good week for me. I'm very happy.
Well, good. I'm glad that you're happy. Can I read you a comment that I woke up to today?
Yes, I would. Make me even happier.
So I don't see all of my comments, but sometimes you open it and just like the very top one, you just read. This is on Facebook. This is like the first thing I read this morning. You have an as face, as with 2 Z's. You have an as face, and redheads always smell like cheese, not in a good way. April Ajoy.
What?
Yeah.
What?
I didn't know there was. Is there a good way to smell like cheese?
Stop. What type of cheese does this individual like?
I don't
Are they
know.
like, I prefer a more blue cheese smell, and you look more like a cheddar smell.
People are weird about redheads.
Why? Is that a thing?
It's definitely a thing.
Do you get weird comments like that, like the redhead comments?
Oh, yeah. I literally had a comment one time that said, I was making a video about hell, and they said that their hell would be waking up to a redhead every morning.
What?
Someone else left a comment to inform me that redheads are the reincarnation of the fallen Nephilim in the Bible, and that we don't have souls. Like, there's some very weird beliefs about redheads.
But,
witches.
Okay, hold on. If we're talking about that extreme, do you get the other extreme? The people who are really into redheads, who are like, oh, you're a redhead. I love redheads. Do you get that too?
Yeah, occasionally. Honestly, though, not as much as the redheads have no souls situation.
Well, that makes sense because the world that we're in is kind of all day. What we do is, April, we take a baseball bat and we just swing at a beehive. That's pretty much what we do all day, right? We just swing as hard as we can and hopefully we don't get stung. So that makes sense why you would get more of those comments, So,
yeah.
You're not like a fashion influencer account, right? Where it's like, hey guys, today's new outfit comes to us from Macy's. I don't know. See, I have no fashion. Is Macy's even trending? I don't know, but you're not one of those, so.
No, that's not my
cross-dressing
shtick.
to become evangelical.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Okay. That's bizarro. Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, that's nice. Well, speaking of weird bizarro things, look at that transition. Oh, that shouldn't be here.
That was great transition.
Get rid of that.
Oh.
I know that was our schedule. I'll blur it out so no one can see it because we're top tier here.
Yeah.
We should talk about something that happened that was quite weird. Yeah, no, for real. So Donald Trump this week spoke to Elon Musk on X, formerly known as Twitter. And it was pretty bizarro. It was only on audio. I want to play this one thing that to me really sticks out as like, I can't believe they actually said this. And also, I want to point out one more thing as well. What's interesting about this whole right-wing media world is that the right-wing media loves to make it seem like Donald Trump is a man of the people. And that Elon Musk wants to bring back free speech. And I don't know, nothing says not of the people than 2 billionaires talking on a social media platform that one of them bought. I'm just saying, like, nothing says out of touch and unattainable than that for me.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure if Trump is actually a billionaire. He pretends like he is, so that's why I'm saying that. But just two white bros who have made billions on the backs of other people unethically. Like, there's been all kinds of cases about the working conditions at X and working for the Trump brand, talking on a social media platform that one of them bought. And then also, by the way, actually limited free speech, like by, censoring words like cis, talking about how we need to free America, and having right-wing media say, men of the people right here.
Well, and I listened to some of this as it was happening. And at one point, Donald Trump was complaining that Kamala doesn't do hard interviews, that she only does these really easy softball interviews, as he's being interviewed by Elon Musk on X, that like this billionaire bought, like he bought a whole social media platform.
Right. Yeah, real. I'm sure he was asked tough questions. Okay, here's a 40-second little clip that I just think, just wow, is what I first said to myself. Here we go.
So, like, after Fukushima happened in Japan, like, people were asking me in California, are we worried about like a nuclear cloud coming from Japan? I'm like, no, that's crazy. It's actually not even dangerous in Fukushima. I actually flew there and ate locally grown vegetables on TV to prove it. And I donated a solar water treatment, a solar powered system for a water treatment plant. And
but you haven't been feeling so well lately, and I'm worried about it.
No, but I mean,
I'm only kidding.
It's fine, It's like Hiroshima and Nagasaki were bombed, but now they're like full cities again. So it's really not something that
That's right.
So it's not as scary as people think, basically. But
So if you couldn't, the art is a little muffled, but essentially what Musk says is that Hiroshima and Nagasaki were bombed, but now they're full cities again. Trump says that's great, and Musk says, yeah, so it's not as scary as people think, talking about nuclear bombs going off. And I'm just thinking to myself, wow, what a slap in the face to the Japanese. Like, what a slap in the face to what the U.S. did to two of their cities, killing women, children, hundreds of thousands, like in the blink of an eye. And now Elon's like, look, guys, everything's fine, though. It's not that big of a deal. Like, they fully recovered. So, NBD. It's like, wow. Shocking.
Also, it's like almost like 80 years later, almost.
Right.
The bombing happened in 1945. It wasn't like they were just great the next day.
That is simply one excerpt from what was a very painful and long talk. And I do think, okay, this is purely Tim Whitaker opinion. Okay, I'm not giving you fact here, people. I'm going into opinion mode. I think that Trump is scared at the momentum that Harris and Walz have been getting. They've been in the news a lot more than Trump. They've been packing out really big arenas. They have huge momentum. A lot of Christians are mobilizing for Harris and Walz, and I think ultimately Trump is insecure and is therefore scared. I think Trump feeds off of being in the spotlight for good or for bad. So the way you get under his skin is by taking that spotlight completely away from him. And I think him doing this thing with Elon just demonstrates how desperate he is, where he has to go on Elon's platform to have a really awkward interview talking about things like this, how it's not a big deal that we bombed Japan because they fully recovered 80 years later. Meanwhile, Harris and Walz are out there using not rhetoric, but just factual, hey, this is kind of weird, like what they're doing, this other political side of Trump, right? And I think it's really effective. And so, yeah, I think that ultimately Trump is a little scared. That's my read.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I don't know if it was at a rally, but there was one time recently in the last week where he was kind of lamenting the fact that Joe Biden stepped down, and that he's like, just think about it. If I didn't debate him, he'd probably still be the running mate. Like, why did I debate him? Like, he is not. Yeah, I think the whole Trump campaign is scared of the momentum that Harris has. And I don't know if you saw that Trump did not make them. But there were some AI images floating around from
Yes.
Kamala's campaign. They did not come from Kamala Harris' campaign at all, but someone made AI images to be like, look, all of the big crowds at the Harris rallies, they're all AI. They're not actually having big crowds. And Trump kind of shared that that sentiment and then started bragging about excuse me. He started bragging about how no one in the history of the world has had bigger crowds than him. And he starts just throwing out numbers like mega church pastors. Honestly, there is a certain, Trump has a certain type of personality that is very similar to like American evangelists, where they're like, oh yeah, I preached in Nicaragua and we had 150,000 people show up in attendance and 95,000 of them showed up.
Yes.
And, you know, like none of them actually had decision cards. It's just like they're eyeballing the crowd and being like, that looks like 500,000 people.
Yeah.
And then they talk about it everywhere they go. Like it's very similar vibes.
Pastor math.
Yeah.
You just looked out. 1 trillion people. Can we say that? 1 trillion. That. You know, a world record.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is actually a good segue because another thing that I think has been sinking the Trump the Trump campaign so far is the fact that many people, not just Christians or more progressive Christians, but people in general, are really waking up to Project 2025. Right? It's being exposed more than ever. And I want to pull up. So if you all know, I'm sure you do. Most of you probably know who Sharon Says So is. Sharon McMahon. She's great. She has a Substack, and they're doing a 7-part series going through Project 2025. It's actually really good. I will make sure we put a link in the notes here so you can check it out. Sharon's great. She's a personal friend. She's been on the show before. And she's pulling clips of apparently some of the internal training videos of Project 2025 have been leaked, and people are going through them. And some of them are pretty shocking. And one of the videos I wanted to share is this one of them talking about climate change, just to kind of give you an idea of how they think about, I want to just be very clear, what is a verifiable data set that the Earth is warming and that human activity has a part to play in that. That's not really disputed, even by a lot of conservatives. They argue how much humans are impacting the climate changing, or they fight the policies that people recommend to curb how much the planet is warming. Just keep that in mind. Here is, I'm not sure who this woman is, but she's one of the people obviously on the inside. This is a training video for whoever would be part of a new conservative administration and how to think about climate change. Check this out.
And climate change activists wield a lot of power. This is an issue to pay attention to as it has infiltrated every part of the federal government. Now, when I think of climate change, I immediately think of population control, don't you? I think about the people who don't want you to have children because of the impact on the environment. Perhaps not everyone will make that connection, but after spending time in the international space trying to protect life, I can tell you that this is part of their ultimate goal, to control people.
Well, there you go. April, I'm not sure about you, but when I think climate change, I also immediately think population control.
Oh, yeah. Because it all comes back to the babies.
100%.
Honestly, I have heard people use climate change as a reason to not have children, but not because of the impact the children will have on the environment, but because climate change is actually a very scary thing that is happening, and people don't want to bring children into a world that may not be sustainable for however long.
100%. So let's get a few things clear. There are a few groups, very small, that would argue we have to stop having children for the sake of the planet. Those groups, I'm not even going to name them because you probably don't know who they are. They have absolutely no power to shape policy, and they are quite literally as fringe as you can get. The climate change rhetoric, or like the dominant perspective for people who are helping us wake up to the reality of climate change. I'm thinking of people like Catherine Hayhoe, a leading climatologist who is also a Christian. they're not arguing for population control. They're arguing for reducing fossil fuels so our planet doesn't warm up anymore, so our weather doesn't get any more extreme, so people stop dying from extreme weather events. And to be clear, scientists have they've tracked all this. Like, this is what gets me about this rhetoric, is that you can actually see all the peer-reviewed papers. You can see their methods. You can see how they measure carbon dioxide, how they can now tell where that carbon dioxide came from based on its molecular composition. That's why people are concerned about what's happening with the climate and the human impact on that. That's not a left-wing agenda. There's not a secret population control agenda behind it. People are literally scared because, as we're seeing, weather is getting more and more extreme. And that impacts where people can live. That impacts how hot places get. I'm sure you saw this year, April. First off, the Earth had a record year of overall temperature. I think last year it set a new record up from the year before that. I believe it was, I don't know, I'm going to botch this. People will correct me in the comments. But wherever people go to make their annual trip to Mecca, I don't know all the geographical locations of that. A record heat killed a record amount of people. So we can actually see the impact of how climate change is hurting people. But for Project 2025, it's just the climate agenda that wants to enact population control. It's crazy. It's so anti-science. It's so ridiculous.
Well, yeah, but there is this very deep belief within conservative Christianity, which I would imagine most of these people in these videos would identify as Christian. That science is anti-God, and that, they hold a literal 7-day creation view, and that anything, we just went to the Ark encounter a few weeks ago, and it's this whole narrative that science is anti-God and you can't trust science, that, that Satan is the father of science. And so you are built, especially if you're raised in this, to already have a natural distrust of science and scientists. Yeah. So there's that. And then also on the climate change front, a lot of people that are anti, or that are against making measures to improve the climate, also believe in the rapture or the biblical end times, and that, it doesn't really matter. We don't need to do anything because Jesus is just going to come back and make a new earth anyway. So it's a waste of time.
And it's a great example of how theology actually impacts people that aren't even part of that theological world, right? Because you're completely correct. And it's weird. What's weird to me is that, for example, Ken Ham, the founder of the Creation Museum and stuff, they will claim to be doing science. They've actually hijacked these terms to further an anti-science position while claiming that they're doing real science, even though they come from a presupposition. The presupposition is that Genesis 1 and 2 are literal accounts of how the earth was formed. So then what they do is they look for evidence to reinforce that presupposition. That's anti-science. The whole point of science is that you do experiments, right, to test if potential theories are real. If they are, you keep moving. Then you have the whole peer review process where other people look at your work to make sure you didn't mess up or that you weren't subjective, etc., right? And then if your theory is wrong, what you don't say is, well, I still believe it to be true, so I'll look for more evidence to prove it. No, you move on and say, okay, that theory is no longer accurate in light of new data. And this is the big inversion, I think, if I can kind of just sum up what I've seen from my evangelical tradition compared to like just general mainstream science, etc., is that one starts with the presupposition that this is how God has ordered and created everything, and now we will go searching for evidence that reinforces that, and we will ignore evidence or reinterpret evidence that would disprove that, because our foundation is biblical inerrancy, right? This goes back to what we talked about last week, this idea of, or even on Wednesday's episode where I talked about biblical inerrancy, the idea that the Bible is the ultimate source of moral, historical, and scientific truth. That is not how science works, period. And what's happening is science is more and more at odds with what these literalists read the Bible to be. And because of that, now it's a war on their faith. Because for Ken Ham, this is true, the 6-day creation account is a gospel issue for him. It is like a non-negotiable. So essentially what we're doing is we're spending all this time, energy, and resources and money to combat a deeply anti-intellectual position that's based on dogma, that will never change. Ken's never going to change his view on this. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if God himself gave him a vision. He won't change.
Because it's not only a gospel issue for Ken Ham, it's also his livelihood. If he were to change his mind or listen to any sort of other interpretation of the creation story, that's his entire ministry. Answers in Genesis, that's the ark. Right. He would lose anything. So I do think a lot of pastors or people that have made a livelihood on Christian ministry and certain beliefs, you cannot change your beliefs, because then suddenly how are you paying the bills?
Yep. And just to be clear for the audience out there, you can be a conservative evangelical Christian and hold to a old earth creation narrative. Many, including C.S. Lewis, believe that. So I'm just pointing out, like don't assume that to be a conservative evangelical means you have to automatically inherit this very fundamentalist view of creation. Many conservative evangelicals reject that, but it's still important to kind of point out. But
right, anyway, and I think it's fine to, even if you hold a young earth creationism view too. Like, there's many ways to interpret scripture. But when you also hold that the earth is only 6,000 years old, then suddenly you have to make justifications for a bunch of things that don't actually fit that narrative. And can I give you one example from the Ark encounter?
Yes.
They had a plaque where they had basically the history of time. And so you had 0. They had it from 0 to 6,000, where 6,000 is present day, 6,000 years. And then 0 is the creation of the earth. And then like somewhere, I don't remember exactly where it was, but maybe like a quarter of the way up on the line, you had Noah's Ark.
Yeah.
And the flood. And after Noah's Ark is when they claim the Ice Age happened. People were right. So some of the biblical stories, like David and Bathsheba, timeline-wise, might have been during the Ice Age. And they were just like woolly mammoths hanging out.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Things that don't make sense.
Cool.
Things that make you go,
Yeah, exactly. That's interesting. Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you're completely right, April. I don't care what you believe, friends. I don't care. If you want to believe that, feel free. Just stop trying to fight for legislation that would then mandate that be taught in schools, right? Because it's actually not factual. So that, for me, is kind of the line. I don't care what Ken Ham wants to do. Have your museum. Say what you want to say. Honestly, like, it's a free country. Do it. Stop advocating for this stuff to be taught to children, right? Stop advocating for this stuff to shape how we understand climate change, because that's where the line's drawn for me.
Right. And there's actual real-world consequences that impact the world, like everybody, every citizen of the earth, because of that belief system.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, let me just preface briefly. Daily Show. If you're hearing this is being used, there we go, under the fair use doctrine. We're allowed to share this without violating copyright, because we're going to give commentary on this clip. Thank you. Okay.
Fair use.
Fair use.
Like a little jingle.
I did. You sent me this, April. I watched it. It's actually pretty funny. Let's watch how the Daily Show is kind of talking about these Project 2025 training videos, and then there's some doozies in here, and then we'll go from there. Here we go.
These are internal training videos for people who want to join a new Trump government in the hopes of someday being kicked off Dancing with the Stars. But they won't just hire anyone.
If you've been convicted of a crime, you will not be serving in the federal government. Crimes such as fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion show a lack of moral character.
Can we just pause it? That is, I can't believe they kept that in the training documents. I cannot. Is that a joke?
They clearly made those before.
Clearly.
Their heroes' convictions.
But edit it out then. Like, just like scrub it. Like, have your intern go through and go, bro, go do a word search for fraud or for conviction and just scrub all that shit, because it's going to look real weird if our employees are held to a higher standard than the person that we're endorsing for president.
Yeah. There's a little asterisk there. It's like, except the president, the highest position in the land.
Yeah, we'd hate to have fraudsters and tax evaders work for the Trump administration. Go on.
To obtain employment in government, it is not favorable if you have accumulated debt and file for bankruptcy.
You might want to run this up the chain to the boss because it's starting to feel personal. No tax evasion, no bankruptcies, no weird hairstyles, no one who had a cameo in Home Alone 2, and definitely nobody who constantly brings up Hannibal Lecter like it's a real person.
I gotta say, I don't know her name. I see her often. She's very funny. She hilarious. Is. Yeah, I love her. Honestly, the whole Daily Show crew is great, but I find her extremely funny.
But hiring standards aside, these videos also delve into Project 2025's agenda and policies. And for a party that's recently been fighting back against allegations that they're weird, this won't help.
Hi, I'm Katie Sullivan, and just a normal American woman.
Are you sure? Because now that you said it, I'm wondering. Hi, I'm just a normal American woman wearing normal woman's skin as we normal women do. Okay, you were being normal?
And just a normal American woman. But to the left, that makes me a cisgendered ethno-imperialist birthing person with pronouns she, her.
Oh my God. Is every sentence going to be like this? I'm sitting in a chair, or as the left would call it, a quad-leg-abled, upcycled, non-binary, wood-based booty ally.
I'm sorry. When she said that, I think I cried. A booty ally.
It's so funny.
Okay, got it. She doesn't have pronouns, but that's all culture war stuff. What about something less personal and more policy, like climate change? And remember, don't make it weird.
Climate change, allegedly, is everywhere. This is an issue to pay attention to as it has infiltrated every part of the federal government. Now, when I think of climate change, I immediately think of population control, don't you?
No, I don't. No, I don't think of population control when I think of climate change, you weirdo. I think of forest fires and Smokey Bear and his tight little bear bod, like a normal American woman.
That's a good clip. Again, Daily Show. This is under fair use, okay? Don't
and we're
flag it.
Free promotion.
We are promoting you. We think it's funny. And we're giving commentary. This is under fair use. That was a great 3 minutes, and I gotta say, I love the weird angle because for me, it's not dehumanizing at all. It's simply a good description of what these people are saying and what they're advocating for. It is weird. It is freaking weird. Climate change is everywhere. Well, yes, we are pumping unprecedented amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, raising the overall global temperature, causing more extreme weather events, and also melting our polar ice caps, which could actually raise sea levels. Yes, it is everywhere. I don't know why that's controversial. I don't know why that's politicized. It's a data point. There's mounds of evidence for it, right? So yeah, it's weird. It's so weird that these are their culture war talking points. I don't understand.
Yeah, and the ideology and a lot of the things that they say and do is odd. And yes. I think it makes sense because especially when they try to paint the picture, which we talked about this a little bit last week, but they try to paint this picture of they are the standard for American families.
Right.
They say we are pro-family, we're pro-American. They're the ones trying to paint themselves as what should be, the goal. We are what true Americans are. And then when you point out, y'all put maxi pads on your ears and went to a political convention.
It's bizarre. And your culture war talking point about Walz is he put tampons in every bathroom in Minnesota. Wow. Oh my God. Oh, I can't believe that. Like, he's crazy. He's insane for doing that. It just, these things to me continue to not add up. And I think weird is a great descriptor, right? It's not personal, it's not dehumanizing, but it also describes how we all feel, right? Like, I feel uncomfortable. I feel weirded out. I feel like, guys, you made a golden statue of Trump and you paraded it around at CPAC 2022 or 2021. That's weird. I will tell you right now, if at the DNC we see on TV a golden statue of Harris or Walz, I'm going to lose my mind. I'd be like, why the hell are we doing this? It's weird. It's bizarre. We don't make our politicians literal idols cast in gold. That's just not what we do for anyone. So yeah, it's freaking weird. It's weird.
Right. And, you know, they are often the party that claims to be for biblical values and that they follow the Bible. But there is a very clear story about what happens with the golden calf.
Yes, I was taught it in Sunday school at like age 5. Okay, at like age, I knew that this is one of, in evangelicalism, there's a handful of biblical stories that you learn about in Sunday school as a child, and that is one of them. That's like number 1 on the list, right after the creation account, and then it's the golden calf, you know, and how they melted all of their jewelry, and then Moses broke the 10 commandments, and then they ground up the calf and threw it in the water, and he made all the people drink. We know the story. So
it's not a good. It's supposed to be bad.
It's bad. It's bad. It literally violates the first commandment out of the 10 commandments. Have no other gods or images before me. Right? I mean, again, this is the same 10 commandments. Not to be crazy, that they want posted in public schools. So I'm just holding you to your own evangelical standard. It's weird when you make golden statues out of your politicians and parade it around as a good thing. It's weird. Just
correct.
Okay, cool. Here's some good news, though, because this goes back to what we were talking about. There does seem to be, and we mentioned this last week on the show, not to say that we're prophetic, but I'm going to say that we kind of are. We have seen a mobilization of Christians who are like, you know what? I'm fed up with this shit. I'm fed up with like this Trump MAGA sycophantic obsession. I'm sick of the dehumanization. I'm sick of just the weirdness that we see here. And we want to do something about it. So there have been 2 major groups and movements, right? We had this past week a huge call organized under the Christians for Harris. I think 40,000 people tuned in for that. They had 30 speakers. Yeah, 30 speakers. Friends of mine spoke. Diana Butler-Bass, people, friends of the show were on. And maybe I shouldn't say this, but they did invite me to speak, and I was like, guys, I'm a nonprofit. Like, there's no way I'm going to buy. Like, I actually, unlike Charlie Kirk, I actually care about my nonprofit status. So, no, I appreciate the offer, but, you know, do your thing. I can't speak. So that happened. And then there's the Evangelicals for Harris group. They had about 2,000 people on their call. Jamar Tisby spoke. I think Shane Claiborne spoke, etc. So there's been some mobilization even in the evangelical sphere to say, I think we need to think about how we engage in our political discourse differently. So I found this because this is how you know those groups are making an impact. This was picked up on MSNBC with, I believe, Joy Reid, right, is her name. She's wonderful. Here's what she had to say. Check this out.
And we begin tonight with Evangelicals, a group that, in a surprising twist, is mobilizing support for the Kamala Harris presidential campaign. One group, Evangelical Christians for Kamala Harris, released a new ad highlighting that time Donald Trump told the Family Leadership Summit in Iowa that he does not ask God for forgiveness.
Have you ever asked God for forgiveness? That's a tough question. I'm not sure I have. I don't bring God into that picture. I don't.
Evangelical Christians for Kamala Harris was not on anyone's bingo card for 2024 because most people assume evangelical is synonymous with conservative. It's not. There are plenty of evangelicals who reject the mean, selfish version of the religion that follows Jesus the Christ. We call them red letter Christians. Think Bishop William Barber, friend of this show, who is, wait for it, an evangelical Christian.
This is big. Let me just say, like, the fact that Joy Reid on MSNBC is letting her audience know that there are evangelicals, not just Christians, not mainline, but evangelical Christians who reject the right-wing, predominantly white evangelical narrative is really big. I mean, that is huge. And she's totally right, obviously. You know, there have been groups, we're one of them, you, many others, behind the scenes for a couple of years now who have been saying maybe there's more to the evangelical thing than just what this right-wing Turning Point USA, Trump-loving world is trying to do. So this is so far really encouraging.
Yeah.
Think of the Christian.
Did you want to give commentary? I didn't want to cut you off.
No, I didn't. There was a pause there, and I didn't know if there was more to the video. So I said,
no.
yeah.
I was trying to say, April, if you want to hop in now, wink, wink.
I was going to, but then it's fine. Continue. I'll save my comments for the end.
Okay.
Christian pastors who led the civil rights movement. Think Rev Sharpton. Yeah. Not all Christians are the evangelical white dudes with main character energy from The Handmaid's Tale. But this most surprising election does keep delivering surprises. Even some white evangelical Protestants are fed up with Trump. That is a group that gave him 84% of their national vote in 2020. They're not alone in tiring of his act. A separate group, Christians for Kamala, had a Zoom meeting last night that included leaders from several progressive Christian groups, urging supporters to get behind Harris-Walz. Call it divine intervention? Or perhaps lots of Christians are just getting fed up with being associated with the hateful vision of Donald Trump, his Bible stunts and religious hypocrisy, and are fighting back with a counter-narrative to conservative evangelicals' overwhelming support for Trump. These groups say the conversation on faith and spirituality has been hijacked by the Christian right.
There it is.
Facts.
Facts, right? Facts. I'm like, Joy, yes.
I remember when Trump said that he didn't ask God for forgiveness, or that, he never had, what she referenced earlier. And I thought for a fact, I was like, it's over. There's no way that evangelicals will still support him, or maybe they would support him, but they would at least admit he's not a Christian, or, he's not God's chosen. He's not this new Messiah-like figure that they treat him as still to this day. But it wasn't over.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I got to say, it's interesting because, April, you and I have been covering this kind of stuff for a couple of years. And I'm not sure about you, but I've definitely gotten critiques that I'm too negative. I'm not sharing enough hope, etc. And it wasn't that there weren't glimmers of hope or even mass mobilization for a different way for us to engage in politics. But frankly, I was just reading the room of where most white evangelicals were. And frankly, to be clear, I think even in this election cycle, most white evangelicals are still going to pull the lever for Trump. But the fact that there are groups of Christians who come from the evangelical world at a minimum, and some are still part of that world, and they're saying, you know what, we have to mobilize differently because we see the threat to democracy Christian nationalism poses to all of our neighbors. How do we think about this differently? That's really freaking encouraging. The fact that there were 40,000 people on a call of Christians for Harris or Christians for Kamala and evangelicals for Harris, that makes me very happy. And a lot of the speakers are people that we know and love and who we have on the show to help us think about these things, right? So overall, it's exciting to see some mobilization for a different vision for this particular election cycle.
If anything, it just gives permission to make your own choice.
Exactly.
Because how long? Yeah. I mean, ever since I can remember, if you were a Christian, you voted Republican.
Right.
In the white evangelical circles I was in, I never even considered the idea that I could vote for anyone who did not have an R by their name. And, we see this rhetoric still today. We've seen pastors on Twitter that are well known that have, said that there should be church discipline for people who vote Democrat.
Right.
And so it's just, if anything, it just makes you feel not alone. And in 2016 and in 2020, I felt like I was the one that was going crazy in seeing and not being able to vote for Trump because of my values. I was like, I don't see him. I don't think he's a good person at the end of the day, much less a Christian. And so just to see these groups pop up, and to be fair, I don't think if you're a Christian, you don't have to vote for a Democrat either. And that's what I think is different about these groups versus like a lot of Christians that would say, if you're a Christian, you have to vote for Donald Trump. You will go against God's will if you don't vote for Donald Trump. I'm not seeing that same rhetoric from the evangelicals for Harris, and even Jamar Tisby. He made a good distinction, I thought, and he spoke at the Evangelicals for Harris Zoom, which you mentioned earlier, which I love him. He's great. But he was saying that there was a distinction in your political theology. He said thin versus a thick. And so I'm just going to quote him here because he'll say it better than me. He says, a thin political theology contends there is only one true Christian party, one true Christian candidate, one true Christian way to vote. White evangelicals have been left ill-equipped by this thin political theology to address the political mess they helped create. This election requires something different. It requires a thick political theology. And he says that a thick political theology can accept that as much as we want our Christian convictions played out in the public sector, we live in a pluralistic society that must make room for opinions and positions that we personally reject, but must have a hearing in a true democracy. And then he also said this, we can learn from Charles H. Pierce, an African Methodist Episcopal minister and abolitionist. He said, quote, a man in this state cannot do his whole duty as a minister except if he but looks out for the political interests of his people. And then Jamar says that Pierce understood the necessity of pastors to look out for the political interest of their people and, encourages pastors to talk to their people. And I think that is such a distinct difference. And how many times did I vote Republican?
Yep.
Because I just thought that was the biblical vote. Yep. That was the way I had to vote Christian. And I never for a second considered that there were Republican policies that went against my biblical teachings or beliefs. And there are Democrat policies that are more in line with my biblical beliefs. And it took a lot of time before I could realize neither party is the Christian party. And you can, I would say today the Republicans have moved, the current GOP has moved so far right that it's hard to see Christ's teachings in them at all. But if you also believe in a literal fundamentalist view of the Bible, then I can see why you would, be anti-LGBTQ, because that's the way that you read Scripture. And if you're going with that, then you would vote red. But regardless, there's no one true way to vote as a Christian.
Yep.
And it's just nice to finally see, like, hey, if you're a Christian, you should just pray about it, read Scripture for yourself, figure out what feels best to you to vote, but know that regardless of where you vote, you're not voting for Jesus Christ.
Right. Yes. It's nice to have our autonomy back, right? To be able to actually think about this for ourselves. The way I parse this out, and I covered this on Wednesday on the podcast only, this wasn't released on YouTube. I did a little monologue thinking about this. I said to myself, well, it's great to see this mobilization, but are we potentially on the path to kind of do the same thing that we are critiquing right-wing evangelicals for, which is becoming the sycophants where only Democrats can save the country? And I think I think what needs to happen is we have to take in our cultural context to decide if our allegiance is to Jesus first. What do we do in our current cultural moment to look for the people and institutions that would advocate for the most Christ-like policies that we find matching up to the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes, etc. And what that does is it gives us a different litmus test than if they have a D or R in front of their name, right? And so I love what Sharon says. She says, principle over party. Absolutely. Maybe in 30 years from now, everything is reversed and we see a fascist movement rising in the Democratic Party, right? And the Republican Party switches to a much more inclusive, centered model of how we navigate for all of our neighbors. Well, my principles have to follow wherever that goes, right? And so I think that's what's helped me is that, no, of course I'm not a sycophantic, maniac for a Harris-Walz ticket, because I know that they're human beings, they're Christians, which is cool, but like they're human beings and we still have to hold them accountable as civil servants to advocate for the least of these as Christians. That's like our calling. So I'm with you, April, for sure. And I think it is wise that we as especially kind of fresh out of the basement of fundamentalism as kind of new Christians, new evangelicals, maybe whatever, that we just tread lightly with how we think about our political endorsements and our political engagement, realizing that we have principles that are core to us as Jesus people that have to supersede whatever letter is in front of someone's name, right? Because I'll tell you right now, if tomorrow Ted Cruz comes out and says, I think we need a federal student lunch program enacted immediately, I'd be like this. Whoa, yeah. I would say yes. Like, Ted, I will high five you here. I will absolutely get behind your legislation to get federal student lunches enacted for all students, right? I would not say, well, you're a Republican, so I can't work with you. Like, absolutely not. So, yeah, I think that is a really wise and astute point. Maybe this is a good segue to promote something big.
Woo!
Big. Yeah.
Do it.
Yeah. I have not told YouTube this yet. We're doing a massive in-person event. Yes, I am meeting up with Representative James Tallarico. He's been on the show before. People love our interview on YouTube. I think it has like 44,000 views, which is crazy. I reached out to his team. I am flying to Austin Theological Seminary September 24th, one night only. We're going to do a live podcast recording with a full camera crew and everything, and we're going to have a live audience. So if you're in the Texas area, or maybe you want to just fly out to hang out for a day or two, come out. It's going to be great. The link to tickets and all the details are in the show notes and in the description. I will tell you this, friends. We priced this event at $10 a ticket. I made it as affordable as humanly possible. We are losing money on this. This is not a money maker for us, which is fine. That's why we're a nonprofit. Happy to do this. But yeah, me and Representative Tallarico are going to sit down and talk about democracy at risk and what do we do as Christians, especially in an election cycle. How do we think about our Christian civic engagement in a wise, Jesus-centered way? So I am so pumped. We have not done a live event, and I think it's going to be close to 2 years. It was with you, April. I think it was our last one. So that's September 24th, live at Austin Seminary. I will tell you that about 50% of tickets are already gone, roughly, give or take. So tickets are flying fast. Pick one up, or maybe a few up, whatever. Meet me there, September 24th. All the details are in the description. It's going to be a great time. But I think, April, to your point, and then we can kind of move on. Yeah, it's great to know that we have autonomy to think about our faith differently. And to be clear, if someone votes for Trump as a Christian, here's what I would tell them, and I have told them this. Your salvation, or whatever you think about the end of the world, all that shit, is not tied to how you vote. It's just not tied to it.
Yeah.
Like, you're still a Christian. However,
it's not an essential.
It's not an essential. What I would challenge them on, though, is, are you advocating for Christ-like policies and positions, or are you advocating for antichrist policies? And then I would challenge them to read the Sermon on the Mount and to contrast and compare the rhetoric of Trump, the rhetoric of the MAGA movement, the policies of that movement, the policies of Project 2025, and then help me understand how these things are congruent for you, right? And that's kind of how I get that both and of, yeah, of course you're still a Christian if you vote that way, like whatever, you know? Yeah. But think about where your allegiance ultimately lies and what leads you to do that.
Yeah, because really when pushed, it's hard. There's not a clear answer on a good Christ-like reason to promote and champion Donald J. Trump.
And
in my personal opinion.
Yes, and I know some people are going to say, rightfully so, well, Biden and Harris have been abysmal on Palestine. A trillion%. 1,000%. We're still signing checks to fuel the genocide of the Palestinian people. That must be a huge critique of any administration that's in office if they don't advocate or get done a ceasefire immediately, right? Yeah. Again, and this goes back to the allegiance thing. My allegiance is not to Harris-Walz ultimately. It's to Jesus. And when Jesus says liberate the oppressed, and I see children being bombed, I don't care who they are or what other policies are advocating for. Maybe I'll high-five them on the federal lunch program and say, while I'm here, you got to stop this shit. Like, you have the power to stop what's happening. Your money is fueling the mass murder of children and civilians, right? So it's a both and approach, not either or.
Yeah, and we should hold, exactly like you're saying, hold whatever candidate we have accountable. And I do see Democrats, for the most part, they tend to do that more with their people, although not when it comes to what's happening in Palestine at the moment, it seems. Other than like people on the left that are doing it. There are some politicians.
There are. You know what's interesting is I was thinking about this because Harris has experienced several protesters who would definitely be considered leftist disrupting her events for in representing the Palestinians, right? In Trump world, I'm not aware of any like further right group that is going to Trump events and protesting Trump for not being firm enough on any given position. So there does seem to be a difference there, right? And I do think, broadly speaking, that Democrats or maybe leftists are way more willing to hold their own accountable for certain positions and values as opposed to the MAGA world. And I think, can I be really this might be a little controversial here. I'm just ideating.
Okay.
But I think there's a benefit to that. The benefit is that you're able to build really big, massive, wide coalitions quickly because people are not going to critique inside the house. But the downside to that is that you lose your integrity, you lose your values, and you lose your actual, like the actual foundation that you're standing on, right? And so I understand why they don't critique each other, mostly anyway, because of how they operate. But because of that, you don't really know where their values actually are.
You know what it's very much like? And I think...
Tell me.
Here's my thoughts on this.
Okay.
I think because you have so many white evangelicals that are in Republican spaces, and Christians in general, and Republicans for so long have tried to portray themselves as the Christian party, like where Christians go. When you are in the evangelical church, for the most part, you are taught not to touch God's anointed. If your pastor does something wrong, you cover it up because you don't want to hurt the witness. And I think that mindset has infiltrated the GOP because, Trump's doing all these things, but we don't want to hurt the witness of our Republican policies, so we're not going to call him out on it. And we're just going to defend.
That's a good point. Yes. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, that's a great observation. Do you want to get into the main video that you wanted to respond to?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I'm going to preface this by saying that I think when most people think about Christian nationalism, you think about Franklin Graham. Oh wait, did you want to play that video?
I have it here.
Should we do that first before we go into
the Franklin Graham one?
Well, yeah, but he was responding to the Evangelicals for a Harris ad.
Let's do that for Tweet of the Week.
Okay, cool. All right. Segueing back. I'm going to ruin that transition.
No, you're good.
Okay. So I think when most people think of Christian nationalism, you think of Robert Jeffries at First Baptist in Dallas. Yeah. You think of, oh my gosh, what's his name? Mike Johnson, the GOP speaker who is advocating for Christian laws to be passed. There's big names that we think about when we think of Christian nationalism. But I don't think a majority of people, unless you're in this world, realize how much Christian nationalist rhetoric is being preached from pulpits in churches that you've never heard of every single Sunday. And it's not always overt. It's not always true Christians vote for Trump. They usually will say, vote biblical values. That's typically what I hear pastors say from the pulpit. When you go to vote, make sure you're voting for biblical values. But every week after week after week, you're being taught what this pastor, we're about to play, says are biblical values.
Yes.
And so this pastor his name is Jordan Aisley. He is the pastor of First Baptist Cleveland in Cleveland, Tennessee. Now, Cleveland, Tennessee is a small city. It's outside of Chattanooga. I think there's only like 45,000 people that live in this city. And I lived here for 7 years. This is where I lived before we moved to Lexington. And honestly, First Baptist Cleveland is the largest church. They have several thousand members. And it's known in the city as kind of being the calmer option of the churches because it's Baptist. Wow. Because Cleveland, Tennessee is the headquarters of the Church of God, which is a Pentecostal denomination, very conservative also.
Yeah.
So the vibe, at least when I lived there, the vibe of First Baptist Cleveland was kind of like, they're the more mainline option if you don't want the wild Pentecostals. So even at the calmer church, you have this pastor, and we'll just play this clip. This was from this past Sunday. Someone sent it to me, but I'm still friends with a lot of people who live in Cleveland, and a lot of people hear this man preach week after week. And I'm just making an example out of him. I don't go and blow him up or
don't do that. Don't dehumanize him, please. Yeah, please do not do that.
Yes, there are just hundreds and thousands of Jordan Easleys across the country that you've never heard of that are preaching messages like this week after week. So just
am I playing the whole clip? We're not going to say anything. Just let it play.
No, we can stop. We can stop it here.
If you want to interrupt, you let me know, because this is kind of your segment. So I don't want to take it over. All right, here we go.
Okay.
Oh, I have to play it first. Boop.
But not only is truth life-changing, let me give you one more fact about truth. Are you ready? Truth is under attack.
Okay, pause right here real quick.
Okay.
So he's doing a whole sermon on truth, right? And if you're listening and you can't see the graphic, he's got a screen that has 6 what he would call facts about truth.
This is very Andy Stanley setup, by the way, because Andy uses the TV like this. So when you first sent this to me, I'm like, wait, is this an Andy Stanley sermon that we're going to critique?
No, this is very mega church vibes. I mean, it's a large church. It's a very large church. So the points on the screen say: 1, truth is objective. 2, truth is universal. 3, truth is absolute. 4, truth is eternal. 5, truth is life-giving. And 6, truth is under attack. And so just think about the way he's phrasing these as facts.
Yep.
He is saying there's only one truth, and he has the truth, and their version of Christianity is the truth.
That's right.
And so when you are just keep that in mind, that people hear messages like this every single week.
Yes.
As you're listening to the sermon.
Chuck Colson once said that it is the cultural crisis of our time. John MacArthur says it's a frontal assault on the very person and character of God.
I'm sorry, you're quoting John MacArthur. That's
I know.
Instant D disqualification.
I left that in there for you.
Thank you. Triggered.
Josh McDowell says it's the last step on the road to anarchy.
Oh my God.
Anarchy.
Pope John Paul II says it's undermining the very foundation of all morality. You say, Jordan, what are these prominent leaders talking about? Let me tell you.
Prominent leaders.
They're talking about how our evil world is attacking the truth of God's word.
Oh, there it is.
Hey, you and I live in a day where political correctness is king.
Oh, boy.
And truth is being silenced by the muzzle of tolerance.
Tolerance.
Hey, the world's on a mission right now to teach tolerance to the people on planet Earth. Do you believe that today? Shake your head if you agree.
Amen. Amen.
Hey, you look from elementary school classrooms to PhD seminars, and people are bombarding people with this idea of tolerance. And they're bombarding our kids right now on YouTube, on TikTok, through liberal media outlets. I'm just telling you, there is an army of people that are attacking our kids with this idea of tolerance. And if you grow up like many of us do, you're being told right now, heterosexuals ought to be tolerant of homosexuality. You're being told that pro-lifers ought to be tolerant of abortion. You're being told that Christians ought to be tolerant of all forms of immorality. And when we stand for the truth...
Literally. Okay, go ahead.
Notice how his examples of what we're told to be tolerant on are political issues.
Definitely.
Homosexuality and abortion.
Yep.
And then he says all forms of immorality.
Yeah.
All forms.
What does that mean? Do you think he's referring to Amazon not paying their employees fairly? Do you think is that part of what we're talking about here? You know, like, it's totally limited to this right-wing conservative culture war talking point bubble.
Right. I don't think it's about inequality or the wage gap.
Right. Or the legacy of systemic racism. Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly. No. Or the fact that our federal wage hasn't been raised in like 35,000 years, and that people can't put food on the table without working like 2 or 3 jobs, and that most people have medical debt that they can't afford to pay. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the gays.
Yes, exactly. All right, continue.
Okay.
What are we called? We're called ignorant. We're called intolerant. We're called arrogant. We're called bigots and zealots and extremists. And why? Because we believe in the Word of God. I want you to hear me say this today. I believe the greatest enemy of truth is tolerance.
Oh, my God.
The greatest enemy of truth is tolerance.
I'm not saying
Have you
anything.
noticed that tolerance?
I'm sorry. I'm just triggered.
If the great, I know, I should have warned you. The
You should have
greatest
warned me.
enemy of truth is tolerance. Does that mean intolerance, truth's companion?
Right.
Just notice how he's phrasing this too. He
Yeah,
is
go
now giving Christians probably a lot of the same people that you and I interact with, or the people that interact with our content, who are pretty nasty.
Yes.
Right? They can say very mean things. The meanest things that anyone's ever said to me all came from conservative Christians.
100%.
And he's now framing this idea of that if someone calls you a bigot, or if someone calls you a bully, or if someone calls you intolerant or extremist, as he said, that's because you're standing up for biblical truth.
That's right.
Not because you're being a jackass.
That's right. This is the great reframing, right? I mean, Ali Sucky does this. This is what you have to do. You have to reframe fruits of the Spirit, really. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness. And you have to say, yeah, that means that you have to essentially ignore and disrespect and make sure that other people in the same country you occupy do not have the same access to the same rights that you do because of how you read the Bible. And that's loving. That's loving.
Yeah.
Telling a gay couple who's been together for 25 years that, no, you don't get the same legal rights that I do. So when your partner's on their deathbed, you don't have the same automatic legal rights to make decisions for them. But I do that because I love you. Because that's the most loving thing I can do for you. That's how, I'm going to say a bad word here. That's how fucked up that shit is. Like, think about that.
Explicit.
Think about that.
We're explicit now.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Like, imagine that. I would love Ali or this guy to go to that couple while that person's on their deathbed and say, hey, man, just want you to know I love you so much that I don't think you guys should have the same rights to make medical decisions for each other that I do.
Right.
Because I love you. Because I love you. That's not love.
Right. And think of how he's framed this. What he has said to lead up to the greatest enemy of truth is tolerance. He gave two examples: homosexuality, abortion, and just vague immorality.
Right.
So people have that in their head already.
Yes.
When they're thinking about, like, he is basically setting people up to disown family members, which he's not saying that, but this rhetoric leads to that. If you believe that the greatest enemy of truth is being tolerant, not even being supportive, not even being affirming, just being tolerant.
Right.
And this further pushes the idea of Christian nationalism, because Christian nationalists believe that we have a God-ordained call to run the country and to tell other people how they can live.
That's right.
And this idea pushes that. It radicalizes people, because now not only do they have their beliefs, and it's okay if you have these beliefs. Like, no one
believe
can
whatever
take your
you want.
beliefs. Right. We cannot take your beliefs from you. But it is not okay to enforce your beliefs on someone who does not have it. And this guy is now saying that if someone does not share your beliefs and is living outside of a way that you believe, that you need to be intolerant of that. And that you need to change that. It's maddening. And honestly, this is tame compared to a lot of Christian nationalist rhetoric and sermons that we hear.
Yeah.
But this type of rhetoric just enables Christian nationalism. And I bet Jordan Easley, the pastor here, he probably does not identify as a Christian nationalist, but he is perpetuating that narrative by telling members of his church to be intolerant of homosexuality and abortion. Were the two things that he said.
Yeah. This is the gateway drug, right? This is the language of, like, step one that eventually leads you down that path of just full-on embrace of Christian nationalism. And by the way, tolerance cannot be tolerant of intolerance. It's a paradox. We all accept that.
Right.
So whenever they try and flip it, well, you're not being tolerant of my beliefs. Yeah, because you're intolerant. That's why tolerance needs, of course. Tolerance cannot tolerate intolerance. It doesn't work that way, right? And you're completely correct. This line, the greatest enemy of truth is tolerance, sets people up to disown family. It sets people up to hate their neighbors, all because they can't make room for how other people see the world. Because the foundation of this is that the Bible, which is always code for how we interpret the English Protestant Bible, let's be very clear and specific, how we interpret this book is how the creator of the universe sees the world. And because of that, we have to enforce what God says is true. But that's only a shield, because what they're really saying is how we see the world is God. Right? They completely inverted it, but they hide behind the Bible for their bigotry and their intolerance. So, absolutely.
It also really bothers me that the greatest enemy of truth is not a lie.
Right.
That is not how antonyms work.
Like logically speaking, You want to keep going?
Yeah, keep going.
This is only being pushed in areas related to the Bible. Culture's not coming after the areas that have nothing to do with the Word of God. But if the Word of God says it, it's in the eye of the bullseye. Hey, there's no room for tolerance in music. I mean, I think about today. If someone in our orchestra earlier today decided that they were going to play the song at twice the tempo of everybody else, you know what would have happened? Yeldale would have freaked. He would have called a timeout and been like, no, you can't do that, man. It's sheet music. We're all going to play the same notes, right? He wouldn't try to convince the rest of the players to just accept that person's interpretation of the tempo. He would have said, no, we're in this together. This is what it says. This is what we are going to do. There's no room for tolerance in music. There's no room for tolerance.
Pause.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, that analogy falls flat on its face because when you have this narrow-minded view of the Bible, and I'm not saying that as an insult. Like literally, my dad was a preacher for a very long time until he died in 2011. And he used to brag from the pulpit that, people call us narrow-minded, but we can afford to be narrow-minded because we're right. I've used that line.
Totally. Not an insult. We're just stating a fact. This is how they think about it.
Right, you wear that almost as a badge of honor. Like
narrow is the way, right? Narrow is the way.
Narrow is the way. Yeah, I'm narrow-minded. Like I remember making an argument of like, why? Yeah, I'm narrow-minded, but I can afford to be because I'm right. Because once you find the truth, you don't need to keep looking for it.
Exactly.
So there's this. But here's where the analogy that tolerance doesn't work in music. Not everyone is playing their same 4-chord song. Like, this is the problem. Like, they have this idea that the entire world was made for them, was made to follow their rules. And so really what Christian nationalists are doing is they are not telling people they're not mad at their own orchestra for playing the wrong tempo. They're going to bands across the street that are playing a completely different genre of music and telling them to play to their tempo when they're playing a completely different song.
100%. And they're mad that those bands get public visibility. Right?
Yeah.
They're mad that other bands are out there and that people like other bands. I mean, if we're going to use this stupid analogy anyway, but like that's what they're mad about, because no one, there is not 1 ounce of legislation in any state legislature or federal, chamber that says all evangelical churches must be forced to marry and accept gay people. No one. Like, literally, this church can say publicly, we are not affirming, we think it's sinful. If you attend here and you're gay, we're going to tell you to repent. And the government will do nothing about it. They're just mad. They're mad that people are pushing back on that in the market of free speech, and that other people, including Christians, see this topic differently and are playing a different song. Right? But because their song is the foundational reality of all existence, everyone's wrong but them. It's their BPM, it's their chord structure, it's their key that they're playing in, it's their ensemble, and anyone outside of that is just bad and wrong.
Right.
And,
they're satanic. They're led astray.
Exactly.
It's
crazy.
But honestly, let's just think too, keeping up with this analogy, which is
God. Thank you for saying that. It is.
Just think how sad and how much of the world's beauty you are missing out of when you believe there's only one song to be played.
Totally.
Like if you've only heard one song your entire life, then it probably would be scary. Like if you're only hearing a 4-chord Hillsong song that plays the same bridge 100 times.
Imagine hearing Oceans your whole life.
I know. And then, maybe hearing R&B might be a little jarring. You know, it might scare you a little. But that doesn't mean...
Or jazz. Oh my God, jazz. What do we do with that?
Maybe some 90s boy bands,
Too far.
Right, but that doesn't mean that those bands don't exist. Like you have people that are saying like, no, if it's not my song, if it's not my beliefs, it's just wrong. And really it's just fake.
Totally.
Fake Christians, fake. Yeah. So.
Not to belabor this stupid analogy, but it actually isn't terrible. And I'll tell you why. I've often said that music is a conversation. Music is vast. Music is wide. If there was a band out there that was like, hey guys, we're a metal band. And we want you to know that our music is the only right music. No other genre, no other songs. We have the corner on the truth of what good music is. No one would believe them, and they'd be laughed at. Right? Because music is conversation. Music is human interpretation and expression. And I know this is going to really make some people mad. Theology is also an art form. Theology is also an expression of human interpretation, of how we see the world, of what shapes us. The Bible was written by humans who were also interpreting the world through their worldview and lens, so to speak, right? So mapping on scientific objective truth claims onto the Bible is like mapping on scientific and objective truth claims to jazz. Or to rock and being like, look, we can objectively prove why this is the superior genre of music. No, you cannot. That's not how it works. It's the wrong category. It's a categorical error. And this is what this dude is doing. The only difference between these analogies is that this guy and what he's advocating for actually impacts people and what they can or can't do in a pluralistic democratic society who do not care about what this guy thinks about the Bible. That's why we're so loud about this. That's why we're so concerned about it, because it's not just a matter of them having an opinion. Fine. It's not illegal to have beliefs. Like, believe whatever you want, even ones that I don't like, obviously. But when you insist these beliefs must become law to then structure a society which other people live in that do not subscribe to your theological convictions, Houston, we have a problem. And yes, we're going to stop you.
Right. And to be fair, he hasn't mentioned anything. He has not mentioned politics. He has not mentioned the election. He has not mentioned voting. But that message is coming through. Without that, when you hear the whole, you have an election, a presidential election every 4 years, and in between those elections, you're just hearing week after week after week sermons telling you to be intolerant of abortion and homosexuality, queer people, trans people. Earlier in the sermon, they played some kind of video. I don't know if it was an ad or whatever, but like, it was gender was in the background. But like, I just feel like they're majoring in the minors, and it's fine. You can have a difference of opinion and a different belief system, but not at the detriment of someone's life, not when you're taking rights away from somebody else because of your beliefs.
Right. I totally agree. Do you want to finish this little?
Yeah, I think there's only a few seconds left. You can.
Tolerance in the area of most things. And yet Christians are being told when it comes to things like morality and righteousness and personal holiness that we ought to be the ones to compromise what we believe and be tolerant to the culture we find ourselves in.
There's the persecution
I believe
complex.
When it comes to things like heaven and hell and homosexuality and marriage and abortion and pornography and idolatry, and I go on and on and on. When it comes to making a distinction between right and wrong, what we should believe and how we should think and what we should do and how we should live, I don't see this word of God being tolerant. I see the word of God being truth.
That is, what makes me angry about this is that there are about 2,000 plus verses that talk about how we treat the poor, the immigrant, the foreigner, how we think about the oppressed, right? And there's about 6 verses total that even mention the idea of same-sex sex. And for this guy, all of those 2,000 verses don't impact how he thinks about injustice, right? Or how he thinks about the poor, or how he thinks about mega corporations that are sucking up literally trillions of dollars in wealth at the sake for the sake of or at the expense of their neighbor. That is not the truth claim. That's all throughout the Bible for this guy. It is the gays. It is abortion, which the Bible says nothing about. Literally nothing. Besides maybe Exodus 22, which would not be in favor of a pro-life position. So anyway, I'm just saying, even this claim, I'm just reading the Bible plainly, is factually, verifiably not the reality for this dude.
Well, it just further enforced the narcissistic worldview that a lot of white evangelicals have in being narrow-minded and in being bigots too, because they do there's no room for other belief. The Bible even says that we should be renewing our minds, that we should allow God to renew our minds. They're not renewing their minds. They have stuck their brain in the mud and they're not going to move
100%.
because they've portrayed we believe truth. And if you don't believe what we believe, then you believe lies. And Satan has led you astray.
Total propaganda, but they believe it. And that's what's so infuriating.
And the truth that we believe is under attack.
Oh, I hear a pad.
He's working hard, y'all.
Oh, yeah, the pad's coming in.
And he's working hard to convince people like you, people that you love, that we ought to reject truth. You know why? Because if you reject the reality of truth, you in essence are rejecting the reality of God.
There it is. There's the connection.
Yep.
Wow.
So he's now just told that entire congregation that if you reject our idea of truth, which is obviously anti-queer, and anti-abortion, which whatever with the nuance of abortion, but those were the 2 points that he kept bringing up. He didn't throw in an idolatry there. But he basically, if you are okay with accepting gay people, then you have rejected God. That's the message you could come away with.
Yes, because don't forget, this message is reinforced through evangelical literature, through all of the big names that evangelicals find for shaping their theology and worldview. It's not just one dude in a vacuum. He's part of a larger system that reinforces this cultural narrative. Whenever people say, we want to stand up for God's truth, we know what's behind that statement. We know the major issues that they're always going to bring up, because that's part of the world, that's part of the air that they're breathing, right? Abortion, gay people, maybe immigration are the top 3 things that get shaped by this supposed biblical worldview, right? The most infuriating part for me is that when you actually talk to biblical scholars, when you actually talk to folks who know the Bible better than any of us probably combined, and they help you unpack what's going on with some of these texts, and they help you understand the world that the Bible's a part of, you realize, wait a second, the Bible is not nearly as clear about gender and sexuality as these people tell you it is. It's not. They literally read their own secular worldview back into the text to mine specific Bible verses to then justify why God's on their side. It is, again, April, it goes back to what we were saying earlier, right? With the scientific method versus the presuppositional approach, where people have these baked in ideas about how the world functions, then they go searching for that evidence to prove it. They're doing the same thing here. Homosexuality is wrong. I'll go to the Bible to justify why it's wrong. I will pull a few verses out of their context. I'll ignore cultural interpretation. I'll ignore the fact that the word homosexual wasn't added in English until 1946, right? I'll ignore all of that because this Bible verse fits my preconceived notion of how the world is supposed to function. And then I create the loop by saying, and therefore God has set the standard, and I'm just submitting to God. That's how this works. And
also notice, too, how it's all framed from a persecution complex.
Oh, totally.
That truth is under attack. And not just truth. God's truth is under attack. And
this bro's a mega church pastor. He's under attack.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How much money do you make, bro? Seriously, what persecution are you talking about? I would assume you make, at a minimum, extremely comfortable living off of the tithe of people that give you money every week.
Yeah.
Miss me with the persecution complex in America. Just miss me.
Well, and when you're saying that truth is under attack too, no one's making anyone in that church get gay married or have an abortion.
No one.
Just the fact that other people are living their lives in a way that you might disagree with, or that's not an attack on you. on them, but it's framed that way because persecution rallies people like no other. Also, Jesus said they will hate you like they hate me. They love that verse.
They love it
because they love being hated, and I almost think like the more hate they get, the more they can convince themselves that they are doing something good for God, that they're on. But also on the flip side, if they get blessed and their life is easy and they're doing really well, that's God's blessing them for doing work for God. So really, whatever happens to them, they can reinterpret it to prove that what they're doing is holy and godly. And how do I know? Because I used to do it.
And this is why many people are sick and tired of all this, and they're thinking differently about their political and civic engagement as Christians, because people are waking up and they're seeing through this. It helps when biblical scholars are more accessible than ever. The internet makes people like Dan McClellan, Pete Enge, Jennifer Bird, Angela Parker more accessible to actually hear what they have to say as experts in the Bible, right? And that kind of blows this fundamentalist narrative away. Especially because, and here's the biggest weakness to all of this. Pointing at you in the, can I even do that? Whoa, that's kind of trippy. Yeah, okay. Here's the biggest weakness. What happens when you take their claim seriously, that we're standing on truth, and that we can, wherever we find truth, we find God? Well, when you start going outside the bubble of evangelicalism, and you start discovering truth that doesn't fit with the narrative you were given, you're already primed, hopefully, to follow that truth, because, again, truth is the biggest deal. We want to be true. We want to stand on some kind of firm foundation. So it actually can prime some people like me, like you, to deconstruct and leave the dogma behind, because once you start looking for truth beyond the bubble of what is safe and within the scope of their truth, you realize how much propaganda was a part of that rhetoric, and it wasn't truthful at all. Right? And so I think that is kind of like the Achilles heel to all of this. It's like, hey, we can, you know what? I'll high five you. I agree. I want biblical truth as well. Here you go. Here's a biblical expert. Here's a biblical scholar giving you the data that they can verify about this particular passage or how we think about this thing. Any thoughts? Right? Now you're forced to confront your own rhetoric with a different kind of reality.
Right. And usually when pastors are saying biblical truth, it's a dog whistle for being anti-queer.
Usually, like 1,000%.
Because they don't mean the biblical truth of turning the other cheek and laying down your weapons and loving your neighbor. Yeah.
Of course not. Anyway. All right. Well, do you want to get to maybe a few different tweets or cover maybe completely changing topic here? There was an Olympic closing ceremony. Why don't we just cover that briefly? Then we'll wrap this bad boy up. And April, you did what you do, and you found some responses to the closing ceremony of the Paris Olympics.
Yeah, there were quite a few. So if you saw the closing ceremony, let's just rewind for a second. If you remember the opening ceremony,
I do.
A lot of people got big mad.
Woo, big mad.
They claimed blasphemy. Yes. They claimed pale horse of revelation.
Right.
They claimed worshiping the golden calf.
I mean, it was so clear that Paris hates Jesus. Like, it was all over the place.
It was satanic to the utmost degree.
The most.
And I don't know about you, but I remember hearing a lot of people saying they were going to boycott the Olympics.
Oh, yeah.
As a result. So you would think that people wouldn't have watched the closing ceremonies because they kept their word and boycotted it, right?
Obvs. Yes, we're boycotting. Yeah. We don't watch that shit.
So I was watching it because I knew that they didn't actually boycott it, and I was watching it in preparation to think of what's going to piss people off. And did you watch them?
No.
Oh, okay. So they started it off. There's this kind of gold, sparkly bug-looking person that kind of descends really slowly from the ceiling.
Okay.
And I jokingly tweeted, or I didn't, on Threads. I posted on Threads that that it was representative of Lucifer, the fallen angel, falling from heaven, and that they were, celebrating Satan as a joke. And then people were for real saying that. So maybe I'm a prophet.
Is that this one? There you go.
No, here's one. Paris Olympics closing ceremony features satanic cloaked figures performing a ritual on stage with a golden horned figure with a bird's head. What about that is satanic? I don't remember sparkly
I can't keep
gold.
Up. Okay, I'm confused. Is it satanic when wait, what's the singer? Is it Sam Smith?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know when he did that big performance and it was all red and it was all that was satanic and demonic. And now we have people dressed really in white and in gold, which are not usually associated with satanic ideas or whatever. And now that's also satanic. It's satanic.
Gold is the new red.
Gold
in Satanic
is the new red. Yeah. I mean, it looks like from this picture, if you're watching, they're playing the limbo. And apparently there it is, friends, satanic. Okay, do I have another one that you have?
You have a bunch more.
Is this
Here's
the one?
another one. Not the fallen. This one's a doozy though. I'll read this one.
How about this one?
Oh yeah. So this one says the Olympic closing ceremony was a satanic ritual depicting the fallen angel coming down to earth after the angel of death from the opening ceremony ravaged the planet. He just misspelled ravaged, so I said ravaged. I like to read them as they are written for journalistic integrity.
I thank you for having such strong integrity, April.
Thank you. Go back to that novel though, because that one's fun.
You got to read this one. I love when you read these. It's great.
Okay, so here's a post. Ready? Sadly, and also he included like 9 pictures from the closing ceremony. Sadly, look what just emerged at the final closing ceremony of the Olympics. They said it's the Golden Voyager that was emerging and resurrecting itself. Yeah, right. And it's standing over the continents. It's a picture of Satan himself. They can tell you it's a resurgence of the Olympics. It was dark. The music was eerie. And they were chanting things as men in dark suits as zombies, bowed down to the golden image of Satan. May God protect his people that are there at that ceremony. The new world order is here, in case you didn't know. No more sticking your fingers in your ears and covering your eyes and making excuses for hell itself. Wake up, wake up, wake up, and begin to repent and cry out for the mercy of God. I will not be silent. God is still on his throne, and his throne wins. Look at the wheels, Ezekiel. End scene.
Good job, April. Can I just say that if people want proof of truth being relative, here you go. Like Christians prove how human interpretation skews reality for all of us. How do you come away watching that ceremony, even the pictures that he has up here? How do you come away and you think that? How?
Do you have the light show one?
Of course I do. I'm getting better at this.
Someone also said that there was a pentagram. It says a satanic light show. Do you see the pentagram?
That is just a common light scene. Okay, let me just can I just opine for 1 second? Can I do that? Okay. Look, friends, I know most of you don't know this, but whenever you go to a concert and you see these lights that are moving and that are in sync, they're actually programmed. There's software that lets people program light scenes. And there's different types of scenes that let lights do different things. And what you do is you create these scenes that are in sync with your music to make it, all together like a show. So lights crisscrossing each other is a light scene. That's very common in the lighting industry. Okay? It's not making a pentagram. It's not a sign of the mark of the beast. It's just a light scene. That's all that's happening.
I do see a pentagram, though, to be fair.
I really don't. I'm looking.
In the middle. It just looks like a star.
Yeah. Wow. Hail Satan, I guess. Like, Jesus. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's lame.
You got to put the tinfoil hat on, Tim.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah. So, happy closing ceremony of the Olympics.
Yes. Woo.
April, we didn't talk about this or plan on it, but did you see the Olympic breakdancer that's going viral?
Raygun.
Yeah.
I did. And
it's kind of outside our scope of what we usually cover. It's not really at the intersection of theology, politics, but it is a culture thing. And so
I for real thought it was satire. I'm still not convinced it's not.
I don't know.
I don't know how anyone could be that not self-aware.
Oh, you know what? Speaking of self-aware, I have to repent.
Oh yeah, we haven't repented today.
Yeah, because I know if my 2 good friends who gave me shit over this are listening, they're gonna be mad that I didn't repent over this. So let me go ahead and do that because they're right, by the way. First off, I was very excited to see that breaking was going to be an actual Olympic competition. I love breakdancing. I think it's super cool. I think it's awesome. Like, oh, cool, Olympic stage, breakdancing. So I watched it and I put on my Instagram on the New Evangelicals, hey, anyone else excited to watch the breakdancing competition? But I didn't realize like how cringy it would be and how in some ways very white it would be. And so my two friends were like, Tim, you did not just say that on your Instagram. You did not just say that you're looking forward to this. And as the event unfolded, I had to eat my words and say, yes, I regret even posting publicly that I was looking forward to this competition because it was incredibly painful. So I repent. I repent for that.
I will say the people that actually meddled though, they some of the stuff they did was really impressive.
No, that part was, yeah, for sure. But like, I just think overall, there was a lot of cringe, you know. And I think that the breakdancing competition is not showing up in Los Angeles. Like they're nixing it for 2028. So I kind of had to eat my words. Like, this is so cool to like, well, maybe like the final competition was pretty cool. And again, it's super impressive. Like, my gosh. But I think leading up to it, especially with Reagan, I was as I saw the clips, I'm like, oh yeah, this is just really cringy. So I apologize.
I really wish it was just one big joke and like a metaphor on how we try to whitewash and colonize things.
Well, that's kind of the point, right? It's like breakdancing comes out of black culture, and then you just have this. Look, anyway, this isn't really. I wasn't planning to talk about this, but it's not lost on me that a professor of cultural studies, makes it to the Olympics and just totally has that performance, and it's on the world stage, and it's like it's just cringy. It's like, yeah. This is what we're trying to avoid, guys.
I'm still waiting for her to be like, just kidding. Like, it feels so satirical. It's hard for me to take her seriously because I'm like, do you not hear yourself?
Well, I just don't know how she got there. Like,
yeah, there's some questions for sure.
The Olympics are the best of the best in theory, right? Like, you're sending your nation's best, and like the stakes are just so high, and it was just cringy, man.
If anything, though, it gave everybody the confidence to say, hey, you could compete in the Olympics.
Yes, you can do this. Also, it's made some great meme content. There have been some top tier memes. So last thing I'll say before we wrap up is I did get this tweet I wanted to share. Josh Dawes, who's like a conservative, he runs like some anti-woke thing. What's it called? I actually have it up here. Hold on. I don't want to misinterpret.
You also forgot to do the ad for Evangelicals for Harris, but we can maybe push that to next week if we're running out of time.
Oh no, we can do that. He runs a podcast called The Great Awakening Podcast. And
clever.
I know he's big on truth, which is why he tweeted, calling it now, @Evangelicals for Harris is run by @the New Evangelicals. So I retweeted him. That's about as accurate as the earth being created in 7 literal days is. And then Ali Stuckey, another good friend of mine, she's a big fan of mine, which is why she's restricted me on her Instagram, hides her stories from me. But she did see this tweet, and she said, no, it doesn't look like that at all to me. Ali, I want to just give you kudos, because on the truthometer, you're 100% accurate. I am not behind Evangelicals for Harris. So that's a swing and a miss, Josh. Maybe next time. But also, Josh, you're more than welcome to come on the podcast. I will gladly talk to you if you so choose to.
Also, why do they say that like that's an insult?
I know.
They've run a very successcul campaign so far.
No, for sure. I mean, yeah, they have. But also, it would violate my nonprofit status, which I actually care about. So, do I have the other? I'm not sure if I had the other thing set up here, April. Let me see if I can find it.
Well, we could at least just show Franklin Graham's tweet and then reference the ad. Maybe we can play it later or tell people to go watch it.
No, I got it. Give me one sec. Thank you.
I need a pad.
Yeah. Here we go. Okay. Let me do this. Boom, boom. Here we go. So this is an ad that the Evangelicals for Harris, I guess, group is running. Check this out.
Have you been to the cross?
This is
and said, Lord.
Sorry, let me restart. This is Billy Graham talking. This is like an old piece of Billy Graham from
preaching.
Yeah, thank you. Wow.
An old sermon.
Losing my words. Here we go.
Have you been to the cross and said, Lord, I have sinned. I'm sorry for my sin. I'm willing to change my way of life.
Have you ever asked God for forgiveness? That's a tough question. I'm not sure I have. I don't bring God into that picture. I don't.
There you go. And then the screen says, is there any greater denial of Christ than to say, I do not need his forgiveness? Now, I got to say, Evangelicals for Harris, that's a pretty powerful campaign.
Yeah.
Like that's a powerful campaign, right? Because what they're doing is they're using classic evangelical beliefs against the person that most evangelicals are telling us is the only true way to vote as a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But Franklin Graham was not a fan.
No, which is Billy Graham's son.
Yes. Do you want to read this one?
Sure. Franklin Graham tweeted, or X'd, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
The liberals are using anything and everything they can to promote candidate Harris. They even developed a political ad trying to use my father, at Billy Graham's, image. They are trying to mislead people. Maybe they don't know that my father appreciated the conservative values and policies of President Donald Trump in 2016. And if he were alive today, my father's views and opinions would not have changed.
Yeah, I don't know about that, Frankie. I'm not sold.
Well, Billy Graham has had some pretty famous quotes about not being a fan of Christianity and Republicans marrying each other.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, as someone, like, I've had people try to use my dad, my late father, against me and saying,
yes, thank you. I thought about this.
You know, like, which to be fair, they're not. I don't know. They weren't attacking Franklin Graham. They were using probably what I assume is public domain sermon of
Billy Graham. Yeah.
Billy Graham, who is a household name. They just used a clip of his sermon in context. They did not take him out of context. He's just preaching, typical Christianity beliefs, but then tying that to a political candidate. If I've had people say that my late father would be disappointed in me because I didn't vote for Trump. Granted, that's on a much smaller scale than what Franklin is experiencing. So I can have empathy for you not wanting your, late parent being portrayed in a way that goes against your memory of them. But on the flip side, I also don't know that it's fair for him to say what Billy Graham would have done either. I mean, he probably would have a closer perspective, but even like me, like with my dad, I'd say like when he died in 2011, which was before Trump came on the scene, he was very conservative. And I honestly cannot say, like, I'd say, I don't know where he would have been, but I really believe that the goodness of his heart would have outweighed his political aspirations once he realized who Trump was, but I don't know for sure. And I can't know for sure.
Yeah.
So, we can't speak for the dead on either side.
Right, that's fair. But I do think using a clip of Billy Graham just to prove the point that, like, this guy that now is the evangelical champion doesn't even embrace the most, like, core foundational evangelical belief about salvation is worth demonstrating, right? So, yeah.
Right.
Well, we did it, April. We got through another show.
Woohoo!
Wow. Well, friends, thanks so much for listening. I'm your host, Tim Whitaker.
And I'm your co-host, April Ajoy.
All right. Well, have a great Friday, friends. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you all next week when I wow, that was gonna come out. Wow, my mind just caught something that would have come out so bad. When
you're somewhere else, not here.
Thank you. Yes, when I am broadcasting from a different location with more details. I'm going to end this stream now. It was good talking to all of you. I'll see you later. Goodbye. That was really awkward. I'm so sorry.